The Dissertation Committee. The Dissertation Committee is a group of senior, junior scholars whose role and responsibility is to guide you through the dissertation process and to ultimately approve your title of Doctor of Philosophy. Today in Office Hours with Juan Manuel, we're going to talk about a topic that deserves a lot of attention, and I'm going to give you my perspective on how to thrive during your graduate program while being strategic about who is a part of your journey.
This is Office Hours with Juan Manuel, creating an academia without walls so you can thrive on your journey.
Hi everyone, welcome to Office Hours with Juan Manuel. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that is dear and near to my heart because I came into a graduate program, as a first generation, formally undocumented student of color, thinking about who I was going to work with, and I selected a variety of different programs before applying. I made my spreadsheet. I identified potential scholars from each university that I was going to apply with that aligned really with my research interests or research questions. And then I arrived into my ultimate university. I ended up choosing to pursue my degree at the University of California in Berkeley, and I had a selection of committee members whom I could work with, and part of that process really involved in identifying not only what they were going to sort of help me with throughout my whole process, but also really identifying my way of working with them and identifying what it was like to show up to office hours with them. So today I'm going to be talking about a couple of things to keep in mind as you start to identify who's going to be on your dissertation committee. First of all, as I said, I went to a University of California school. I'm going to be talking from a perspective that is unique to that. However, I think that we can take some points that might apply to your program. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out via YouTube and in the comments section. So my process of selecting my dissertation committee really involved taking a lot of classes with some of the prospective people whom I thought I wanted to work with in my program. The normative time at that specific time was about 5 years, but really most folks were finishing out in 6 years. And the first 2 years were really dedicated to coursework and doing seminar graduate gatherings or taking seminars with prospective people, and I'm in an interdisciplinary field, working primarily in performance studies, but also immigration, in queer of color critique, also working in anthropology. So my fields were kind of overlapping, and in my program I had the opportunity to take classes and seminars from a variety of different folks in those respective fields, and perhaps you might have the experience where you're kind of working within your specific department and there's not a lot of opportunity to work with a lot of folks. Now, the benefit of my program was that I could take classes from all these various different fields, and that's what I did. My first 2 years, I took seminars in the German Studies department because there was a course on immigration, principally focused in Europe. But I decided to take it because I'm like, oh, maybe I might work with this person in this department. And I also did that in other departments, in Latin American studies, as well as anthropology. Now, I took the first 2 years really to identify not only who the person might be, but also the type of questions I wanted to be asking for my dissertation. Now, the dissertation writing process, especially during the coursework years, is really unruly. It's full of opportunities. We're asking questions, what is my project? And I felt like I came into my graduate, my PhD program with a pretty clear idea of what I wanted to study, and really identifying the role of dance within undocumented migrant communities, and trying to understand sort of not only the role of dance as an expressive, symbolic, meaning form, but also how was dance part of immigration rhetoric, and how did it help folks navigate sort of legal discourse. And so it was very specific. I had a case study, I had a state, but throughout my process of the coursework, I actually realized, oh, I might want to go in a different direction, and ultimately I did. And the project that I came in with in my to my PhD program was actually not the project that I ultimately ended up doing, and I don't think that is uncommon. Now, that had, of course, specific consequences for my selection for my dissertation committee. I had the opportunity, to take some classes and get to know some of the different faculty member, not only in the seminars, but I made an effort to really meet with them during office hours multiple times a semester because I wanted to find out what they were like. I wanted to find out, hey, I'm going to be spending a significant amount of time with these people during a very stressful part of my life, and I wanted to see how do we get along together in office hours, because that would give me an indication sort of, as we advance in the dissertation writing process, and especially when we're ABD, all about the dissertation, I want to find out, how is this person going to work with me at a time when I'm very stressful, but also how am I going to work with that person when they're undergoing sort of their own stresses in their lives, and I wanted to get a feel for that. So I made the decision to make regular appointments with some of my prospective committee members. I sought them out. I went to their office hours, and I got to see how are they communicating with me? Are we spending most of our time in the office hours talking about my project, or are we spending most of the time talking about their projects and their research? And also, are they also talking about what's going on in life and some of the challenges? And that really gave me an opportunity to think through how we could, how I could sort of assess as best as I could if I wanted to work with them and how I wanted to work with them. And so I was very intentional about that. Coming from a migrant family and what I consider to be a migrant disposition, I have been in situations where I choose or I'm forced to make relationships with people, so trust is very important to me, knowing who I let into my life and how I let them into my life, and it's important for me to get an assessment of that early on, and being able to sort of trust them with what's going on, but also that I try to find out what is helpful for me to get to my next goal, right? And so I came in with that disposition. Now, selecting the actual committee, involved a variety of different steps, both in identifying who I wanted to be in them, but also how they were going to help me. Early on, I learned that, when I go up for tenure many years down the road, your dissertation committee can't be your letter writers. Now, that was news to me. And so early on, I just said, okay, who are going to be some of the people that are going to help me get through this first stage of my hopefully long career? And I made decisions about working with some people whom I worked with really, really well, but maybe possibly that didn't really align with my research interests. And maybe I wanted to keep an ongoing relationship with them. And maybe I was part of a working group, and I met with them every week. But they weren't really a part of my committee, a dissertation committee. Now, in my case, I ended up choosing to have a dissertation committee of 3 people. In my department, we were supposed to have 2 sort of internal committee members and then external committee members. That was someone from in a field who was sort of adjacent. Now, I chose to keep my committee small. Largely because I know that managing people and timelines, especially towards the end of the dissertation when it needs to get reviewed, these drafts are going between these people. They have to approve it. So I was I'm going to go with the bare minimum because that way people can actually get to know my project, but also I don't have to manage 5 people. I know some folks who had committee members of 5 people plus an additional outside reader. That was not my jam. I decided I'm not going to go that route. I want to, contain as many schedules as possible. And as part of my decision-making process, I decided to work with people, whom I got along pretty well, but also with some folks who maybe it didn't make sense to work with them in a very close way, but that they were important to be in my committee, because if I was going to go into a specific field, I needed to just have them, right? In my dissertation, they were going to be my letter writers, and their names are very legible within a specific field. And I found that to be very instructive because I was going into my office hours meetings with them. and knowing that, hey, you know what, I'm going to meet with you for this specific time, 30 minutes, and I'm going to have this conversation with you because I was being very intentional about what I was getting, from our conversation, rather than feeling like I was really subjected to what everything they wanted me to do because they're busy. But I also realized like I have very clear intentions in trying to figure out what my project was going to be. And part of selecting your dissertation committee is identifying like what you want and what you need, and trying to really articulate that, and taking out a document and saying, for my dissertation committee, I want someone who's going to, be a person who's going to help me get through the stress, and who, has their who has a legit record of publications, and they know how to get through this field. But also, they're just really approachable and down there. And I'm like, I need to have someone like that in my committee. I also need to have someone who was, who was really squarely within my field, but maybe I didn't get along with them. Not that I didn't get along with them, but we just had very different personalities. And so I was very strategic, and I'm like, okay, I can meet with this person, 20 to 30 minutes a month or every other month, and I knew what I was expecting because I anticipated, okay, we just have very different personalities. We show up, we talk about what to do, and then I go away. And then I also wanted to, have someone that was going to really just keep me accountable to the work that I was doing, since I do interdisciplinary work. And of course, all of my dissertation committee members were going to keep me accountable to the work that I was doing. But specifically, there were some areas where I felt really unsure. I work, my research intersects, links critical dance studies with ideas of illegality and citizenship within Afro-Latinx, Latin American experiences. And I wanted someone who could be like, hey, you're working with Afro-Latinidad or Latin American experiences, like, this is what you need to know. And I wanted someone because I was really anxious about some of my training that I may or may not have had. And so I just wanted someone to look out for maybe some inconsistencies or omissions that I did not have available. And you do some of that work in the qualifying exams or A exams, but I really wanted that to be at the foreground of my committee members. Now, one of the other things that I was really looking for is that I wanted someone in my committee whose writing I really enjoyed. Not just the way that they were thinking about things, but the way that they write. Fortunately, I just happened to have a committee member whose writing style I really enjoyed, and who was also super approachable and welcoming, and really gave me a lot of advice about how to navigate life. Shout out to Dr. Juana Maria Rodriguez in ethnic studies, and she was really approachable, but also was very open and available to give me a lot of information to get me, to help me navigate academia early on. And so I owe much credit to her and my approach to academia because of the way that she works. And she was able to kind of help me navigate that process. And also, I just really enjoy the way that she writes. And I wanted someone whose style really really inspired me, and could look at my writing and say, you're working on this sentence was great, this one needs a little bit of work, this one was confusing. And I wanted someone whose writing I really admired, and would be able to look at my work, and we can be in conversation with each other. Certainly I wasn't looking to model what she was doing, but someone whose writing I felt could be in conversation with my writing, and I really enjoyed that part too. So those were some of my ways of approaching who I wanted in the selection committee, on the dissertation committee. Now, the process itself was very involved, sending out an email to them, each of them, and saying, hey, I'm interested in working with you. Do you have, time, interest, and availability? And seeing what they would say. Now, committee members are always busy, right? So when I sent out that email, I gave as much information as possible, saying, this is my project. This is what I think, this is how I think you would benefit my project, and this is my intention of how often I plan to meet, and this is my way of working. For example, I'm the type of person who needs to have a roadmap, and I'm constantly working to meet that roadmap. So I actually scheduled office hours to meet with my committee members once a month. For some people, that's atrocious. So for some people, they're like, oh, that's way, way, way too much time. I have some colleagues who met with their dissertation committee advisors once a year. That doesn't work for me. largely because I like being in community, I like talking, and I wanted to get the feedback early on. And I say that for me was really helpful because later on, when I was in the dissertation writing phase and finishing up, as well as in the job market, my committee members could already speak to that. They could speak to my work ethic, to my project. They had an understanding of it rather than just having reading a project once, right? And they could speak to those elements. So that was kind of my my way of articulating to them, like, hey, this is how I work. This is what I aim to do. I aim to meet with you once a week. And they responded in a variety of different ways. Some said, well, you don't need to meet with me every month. Just send me a 2 to 3 page report every 2 months to let me know where you are in your progress and how much progress you're making. So part of selecting the dissertation committee is really identifying how you work and how your committee works, and to be really clear about those differences, because they have a huge impact in when you're going through revisions, when you're asking for letters of recommendation. And so I would recommend that as you're sort of in the early stages of selecting your dissertation committee, or if you've already selected your committee and maybe you're finding yourself in a jam, or you're trying to figure out how to improve your working relationship with the committee, is that you would actually make a spreadsheet. You'll probably tell from office hours, I love spreadsheets, or take out a Word document and really identify, how does my committee member work? Not just what they do or what they write about, but how do they work? Do they prefer short sentences when we communicate? Do they prefer a document that has 2 to 3 pages about the status of each project? So, for example, I had a committee member who wanted me to have a 2-page working document that was updated at least once a semester, that had a brief paragraph of my overall project and a status of each chapter. Now that was really helpful because I was able to keep myself accountable, but also if I requested a letter of recommendation from them, they could just go to that document and say, okay, Juan Manuel is doing this is what the project is about, and this is where they are in their status. And also, as a part of that document, I also made a list and sort of some of the projects or publications or conferences where I was presenting, just to give them an idea. That was really helpful. Because I said at the beginning of this episode, part of selecting your dissertation committee is just managing people and managing the flow of information. And that's something that's really key as you advance further in your career in academia. So part of that is identifying workflows or ways of communicating with a committee that work really for you and that work for other people. And certainly, you can do it ad hoc, you can check every once in a while, but for me, what I found to be the most fruitful is that I can keep my committee up to date with the work that I was doing, but also I kept myself also up to date with that work that I was doing. And it really kept me accountable, so that way when I got to being on the job market, I didn't feel so far behind. I mean, yes, there was stress. I felt like I wasn't going to finish the dissertation. There were times where I was like, there's no way that I'm going to finish this. I know I've been at it for 6 years, but maybe tomorrow I might throw in the towel and walk away. Those feelings are valid, and those feelings are very much present, and I experienced those. But then I would look back at the progress that I had done at the project, or I would check in with my committee and I would say, hey, how's my work doing? And they would reassure me that the work that I was doing, had not only value, but they were trying to also encourage me to kind of move along, and they gave me feedback that would help me identify the areas that I could sort of finish that were good, that was good for the dissertation, and then also areas that were going to be great for the book project, right? So as you think about selecting your dissertation committee, really take down the steps to identify, what are some of the areas that you feel are your strengths, because you have so many. Identify some areas that you want improvement in terms of whether it's writing, in terms of professionalization, in terms of your project sort of area of expertise, or possibly maybe just area of communication or building community, and see which one of your committee members sort of align with those, and see if they actually feel this, because you ideally want to find someone to match each of your areas. And as you will soon find out, or at least what I found out, was that sometimes you have one committee member that meets a couple of those criteria, which is really great. That way you can have less people in your committee, which fortunately worked out well in my situation. So this is my advice to you as you identify your dissertation committee, or if you are in the middle of working with your dissertation committee, identify ways to improve it or modify that working relationship so that you can thrive. All right, thank you for tuning in to Office Hours. I'll see you next time.
This is Office Hours with Juan Manuel, creating an academia without walls so you can thrive on your journey.